With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Let us jump right in then, Brien. So, if it's okay with you, I'd probably rather go chronologically, and I would definitely like to start at the Tombstone incident. What in the world was this? And oh, if I may, if you wanted to share, where all these places are, it's up to you. Where you are now, where these things happened as we move through. Totally up to you as far as where you want to share the locations and how far down the road do you want to get with that.
Cool. Yeah, Chattanooga, Tennessee. For the life of me, I cannot remember the name of the cemetery, but it's right next to an apartment complex that my mother and I lived in. I remember one year, like, I don't know, all the kids and people, just a lot of times would go on a walk over through the cemetery. They had lots of blackberry bushes in places, and that's why my mother and I were there. She was picking blackberries, and I was a little kid, and just sort of hanging out in the graveyard because that's not weird or anything. Uh, but I don't know. She was, doing that, and I was walking around and was just looking at the tombstones, and because being like, I guess maybe 5, might have been 4, hard to say. Never really taken an up close look at them before, and I just remember touching it, and the next thing I knew, this tombstone that I'm about 6 feet, 6'1" now, and it probably would come up to my knee at least, just fell over. It was level, sitting there on its base, and the next thing I knew, it was on top of me. And there's no way it could have fallen, but I remember standing there, and it just tipped and landed on me, pinned me there. It was really strange because even then, as a little kid, as soon as my mom and was lucky enough to find like a groundskeeper around, they both had to pick it up off me. It was well over 150 pounds.
Oh my gosh. And are you able to breathe under this thing or just barely?
It was, luckily it was just on my legs, but like it was pinning me to the ground, and I couldn't get out from under it, and it was crushing my legs pretty good. Like I was hurt. Didn't break anything, but it messed me up pretty good.
You probably don't like to visit graveyards very much now, or at least get next to tombstones, right? Even though you're a whole lot taller now, I mean, it's got to probably stick with you.
It's I don't know. I mean, it just, I don't know. I guess with all the other stuff, like that's not quite. It's weird.
Right.
I'll say it's weird, but like at the time, yeah, it was terrifying because my mom was, of course, like, "How did that happen?" And I had nothing to answer that with.
I wonder if the groundskeeper tried to explain that somehow, or did he say anything?
Well, he was from what I remember, and what talking about it with my mother years past, he was completely confused on how I got it to get. He was like, "Did you pull it down on yourself?" And I was like, "No." And he, after picking it up, he's like, "There's no way he could have pulled that over. Like it was way too big for like a 4 or 5 year old to be able to, pull over like 150, 200 pound tombstone. There's just no way." I don't know. My mom had no idea how I could have managed to do it either. So I don't know. I guess when I was a kid, I just sort of accepted that maybe something pushed it over on me. I don't know. It was really the only thing that actually made sense to me at the time. Because, I mean, nothing else could have done it. There was nothing around. It was completely level.
Well, and especially looking through your list of the things that we're going to be talking about, the major theme of them, at least to me, seems to be maybe, I don't know, and this is going down quite the conspiratorial path, and it's just conjecture, like everything. But you kind of even said it yourself. Well, maybe something pushed it down on you. I mean, that seems to have started something, right, with you, and then essentially with your daughter, which we will talk about later. But I mean, do you think at all that this tombstone coming down on you is connected to the things that we will be talking about throughout the chat today?
I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if it turned out that it did. To be honest, I really wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, because the very next thing on your list, and I kind of created my own bullet point list so that we just we stay on track here. At least for me, I'm not worried about you, but the next thing is recurring night terrors, and then this situation on Christmas Eve with this whatever that was. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that, but how much further down the road was that?
Not. I mean, 2 to 3 years maximum. The same. We were living in that same apartment complex when that happened. That's something that I really haven't talked about, and to this day, my mother, I don't think she ever fully believed me about the thing on Christmas. But yeah, we, it was the night before Christmas and everything, and I'd been sent to bed, and just like I guess every other kid on earth, you're excited it's Christmas and you're gonna get to open presents in the morning and whatever. And I remember laying there, listening to see if I could hear, reindeer landing on the roof of the building or whatever. It was I don't know, the feeling of just something not being all right just sort of kind of started creeping up in my head. And then I started hearing stuff moving around in my room. Just enough to where I would have thought it was like maybe our cat at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But then I, kind of thought I thought the cat was downstairs when I came up here. And I got up or sat up in bed, and stuff just sort of kind of started making noise, like, just toys or whatever bumping into each other. I guess when I absolutely realized that something was totally not okay is when I started hearing like the breathing, like a real kind of raspy but heavier, and kind of a menacing exhaling kind of. I don't know. It's not something I could really reproduce. Almost not quite the pervert on the telephone call, but much scarier than that. And it the breathing noise started moving through the room, and I was not okay with that. And I remember, calling for my mom. I got out of bed ran to the bedroom door and opened it and called down to my mom again. She got upset. She was like, I told you to go to bed. If you come down here, you're going to ruin your own Christmas and everything. And, I tried to kind of get her attention and let her know that something was scaring me, but she just thought I was being a bratty little kid that wanted to see all of his presents and stuff. And I wound up having to go back into the room and stay there. And when I shut the door, kept hearing the breathing kept getting closer, and I was too afraid to move. I was still standing at the door with it shut, and then I started hearing it right behind my head. I don't know. I kind of just freaked and ran and jumped on the bed and tried to cover myself up. And that's the first time I've that's the first time I've experienced anything, to this level in any kind of way. But I felt pressure start, touching the top of, the surface of my bed. And it was some substantial weight, like way more than a cat. But it was weird. It was like the points where I guess like if there was a cat on the bed, where the cat's feet would go, you could tell it was like it was something small but had way more weight to it than would make any sense. If that I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it does.
Like I was too terrified to move. At that point I couldn't scream. I just remember the last time I heard the breathing, it was like right by my ear. And I'm laying in bed with this thing like right next to me. Then I don't know. I passed out, I guess, but and while I was crying, I was freaked out. I couldn't get any help, and I just blacked out and wound up waking up the next morning absolutely terrified. Because I mean, I don't know how. I wouldn't say I just fell asleep, but it was like I lost consciousness, and then the next thing I know, it's morning, and I'm being called to come downstairs and be happy because it's Christmas, and all I could do was just be terrified at that point. Like, my mom just was like, "Oh, you just had a nightmare." Around, I guess, that same time, I started having the reoccurring night terrors, basically, and those. I believe the last time I had one of those, I was, I don't know, probably my late 30s at least, but all of them from about the time I was 5 or 6 or whatever to my late 30s, the dreams were not exactly the same every time. There would be little things changed here and there, but the 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 thing in the dream, uh, I wouldn't say it was like it was more like some crazy looking giant green dragon headed thing. It would like I don't know, the things that it would say to me were so far like away from anything at that age that I would have been exposed to. Like, I mean, it would in graphic detail be trying to kill me in my dream and telling me like all of these horrible things that it wanted to do. Occasionally in the dream, I could get away from it or I could hurt it. And other times, like I would wake up right before I would have died in the dream. And when I would wake up, I would be screaming or drenched in sweat. And I don't know.
It would tell you, Brien, like in graphic detail, like violent things that it wanted to do to you?
Yeah. Or family, or not even just, causing bodily harm, about like my soul.
And in these dreams, you said that occasionally you could hurt it. How would you be able to do that?
I mean, at times I had a weapon. Sometimes it was a sword. I mean, I was a kid, so I'm sure some of the crazy stuff I watched as a kid probably bled into it somewhere. But like,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, sometimes I could fight it off. It wasn't ever really one of those fantastical, like, I managed to stab it and it died and everything was great. It was like, if I managed to beat it in my dream, it was with a heavy cost, and I could barely do it. And the older I got, in ways it would get easier for me to beat it, because I got used to having these dreams at points, in ways like when I had one, you know, I knew that I'd had these, for years before, and I kind of knew what to expect. So the shock of it, in my adulthood, having one of these dreams, like it oddly became like familiar territory. The setting of the dreams were always the same though, and that's something that's always kind of been strange to me. How in that way, very very little ever changed with it, and nothing ever changed about that creature at all. It's still, it always was the same thing, and occasionally it would even make references to things that happened in other dreams. And I mean, I remember it telling me in one of the conflicts we were having in my dream that it would never leave me and never let me go, and that eventually in time I would wear down, and that's pretty much when it would win.
And do you still have these dreams to this day?
I haven't had like, I'm 44 now, and I think the last time I had one I was like 38 or 39. Very rarely am I able to recall a whole lot from, dreams, but these things, it's unbelievable, the detail that I can remember about a lot of them, down to I can tell you what like the dirt on the floor of this place felt like on my feet. At a point, I just I started just, I don't know, I guess I just accepted on my own that I was like, this has to be more than just a nightmare. And I mean, at a point, I cannot remember this. This is one of the things that is weird to me. Out of all the details of these dreams that I can remember, the one thing that I've struggled with remembering is this thing's name, because it told me at a point in one of these dreams, it told me its name, and I've I've gone as far as to like try and find this thing's name, just doing the best I could with, searching on the internet or in books, dealing with like demons and stuff like that, because that's, at this point, that's what I know that it is. There's not a doubt in my head that's what it is.
Yeah, and if
else.
you have its name, it gives you some power over it, right?
That's what I understand. The closest thing I could find, and I wish I had it, I wish I'd written or saved some of this stuff over the years so I could have it. But on another hand, maybe that would make me feel a little bit too crazy if I held on to all that stuff all this time. But I remember finding like some village or city or town or something somewhere in the Middle East, and I want to say the name of the place, after all the looking and trying to do research on it that I could find. So there was something about it that it was essentially a serpent, is what I was able to learn, and that's the most detail into it that I've been able to find trying to do the research with what little facts that I could, that would lead me to anything from those dreams. There's not been a whole lot from these dreams that I could use to be able to really do any kind of, research as far as like where this might be or whatever, because at a point I was like, I wonder why the venue for things, these things that happen in my dreams, why is it always the same? And why does nothing seem to change in this place? Like it's always been some dark, except for these fires that are lit, in various places in this big, I don't want to call it like a castle or a dungeon or anything, but it's a dark stone structure. I don't know. It's kind of inescapable. There's no light except for the light of these fires and this thing. It's wherever it is, it's this thing's place. The thing is in control of that place. That's where it that's where it lives, for lack of a better term. Yeah, no, there's been, I really do feel like this thing has followed me. And,
Well, Brien, something you said is kind of interesting, and that is the fact that you kind of found maybe the possible root of the word, and you said it was kind of Middle Eastern and serpent-like, and I believe, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, the late Rosemary Ellen Guiley, she actually has written a lot on the jinn, and she felt like most everything paranormal, supernatural, the really dark stuff, demonic stuff was all tied to the jinn.
yeah, maybe. I've not done a ton of reading on them or anything. I'm not, by no means I'm an expert on really anything regarding this stuff, but I don't know. That would be something that, I don't know. I might look into that.
I mean,
As
just the
far as,
fact that the town or the place that you found that one word, was tied into the closest thing that you could pinpoint as far as this thing or its name and its origin is something Middle Eastern. So that just kind of stuck out to me. Not saying at all that's what's going on here, but yeah, if you come across anything, let me know.
Okay, I absolutely will. One of the things that always kind of that I thought was odd about the serpent thing was the fact that the thing that I would always be trying to kill me was, very reptilian in a dragon, lizard, serpent kind of way. I mean, bright green scales. is one thing that has always been part of it, like very vivid, bright green, and its eyes. It, and it always has the same very, I don't know, the eye, thinking about how this thing's eyes look still bothers me. Very orange. Just the colors of this thing are extraordinarily vivid, and but yeah, the thing's eyes have always, like, I tried to draw them at some point, when I was younger, and I think I got too close to it because I couldn't stand to look at it.
Freaked you out. Yeah, you're like, okay, enough of that. I'm a little too good at this.
That's close enough. I'm good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But no, yeah. There's been other things that have happened, like, in my life, where other creepy, obviously bad stuff is going on, and at this point, I'm not sure that it was different things or if it's just been this one thing.
This one thing that has promised to follow you around, that will never leave you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll move through the other stuff here so that everybody can hear and make their own deductions. But yeah, if you start to dig into the jinn or anything Middle Eastern, or if you come across anything, especially the name, I mean, that would be probably a big part of it. But let me know, because I would be interested in that. I am also not nearly as well read on things like the jinn as I probably should be, considering the show that I do. But anything I've ever heard about them is you do not screw with the jinn, and don't want to, catch the eye of one. And no pun intended, considering the fact that the eyes are something that seems to have stuck with you maybe the most. But you know what? And honestly, sometimes when, someone's hearing someone else talk about dreams, they're going, oh, come on, it's just a dream. Like, what's the big deal? It's just a recurring dream. But almost always when I have somebody talking about a weird dream, somebody will email me and go, okay, this is crazy, but, ... So it would be cool once this airs to see if anybody will come forward and say, you know what, I've seen that serpent thing. And I don't know, maybe they'll bring forth a detail that you can say, okay, yeah, this is legit. This is not just them, spitting out exactly what I already said. So sometimes that does happen. So I implore anybody with any info on this, if this has jogged anyone's memory or mind, get in touch with me, please.
I certainly wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it would be interesting to at least meet somebody else that knows this thing the way I do.
Yeah, because maybe there's a detail that you haven't shared that they will, and you'll go, oh my God, that also is in my, you know what I mean? Like something that will verify that they're not just spitballing what you've already said back to you. That will be interesting. That does happen sometimes. Well, Brien, let's switch gears here and talk about the house in Livingston, Virginia.
Oh yeah, that place was really cool house. Was not thinking anything like that was going to happen there at all. It was, I think, the summer between 8th and 9th grade. My mom and I went up there to meet up with some friends of ours and go on a vacation up to Chincoteague Island up there. And on the way, we stopped in Livingston, Virginia. And it's at the time, I haven't been up there in years, but at the time, I was really kind of blown away at how small the little town was. But apparently they had a lot of history there. Like the house itself, without giving away too much about it right at the beginning of the story, the house was, I believe, 300 years old. So, like, it was pre Revolutionary War construction, It was like a 3-story house, and each, level had a porch that wrapped around the outside of it with a staircase that sort of went up the middle of the house. My friend Michael had this big bedroom with 2 beds, and we were just hanging out in there. And like the night we got there to stay before all of us went on to Chincoteague Island, and we were just watching movies, being ridiculous, fart jokes and whatever. And eventually, we got tired and passed out. It was August. I remembered at one point, like, I kind of woke up and I was freezing in this, super old house that, I mean, it had been, renovated to an extent and taken very good care of and everything. But it's August, and I was on the second floor, and I couldn't believe how cold it was in this room. And I'd had no blankets on me when I remember going to sleep completely covered up. And, just, thought like, I probably just kicked them off myself and, grabbed them, covered back up, and lay back down and went back to sleep. And I woke up a second time, and the covers were down by my feet, like completely off of me, all the way at the bottom, like, and some of them were on the floors down at the foot of the bed. And I was like, man, there's no way I can be this cold and be kicking these covers off. Like, I was having trouble believing that I was doing this myself. And I look over at my buddy Michael, thinking, is this dude screwing with me, being a turd? Because let's pick on the kid that hasn't stayed here before or whatever. But I was irritated, and I got the covers and, laid back down and kind of held on to them, expecting to feel or hear, my friend get out of bed and sneak over there to rip them off me or something like that. And I wasn't even asleep yet, and the covers got ripped off of me, yanked out of my hand. I looked over, at his bed, and that dude was like laying there drooling all over his pillow, just sawing logs like you wouldn't believe. And that's when I really started to get freaked out. And I heard this giggle. I heard this little laugh towards the foot of the bed. Probably almost crapped myself. Like, and I looked down, and literally it's this little girl who I can partially see through is standing at the foot of my bed with her hand covering her mouth, smiling and giggling. At that point in my life, I don't think I had ever been scared like that before. She just sort of stood there, and, her hand went back down towards her side, and she smiled. And then I've heard you talk about it before, and until I heard about it on your show, I didn't know it was a thing at all. But she turned and kind of gasped and looked over towards the corner by the door of the bedroom, and there was this man standing there with he was black, had a black hat, black suit. Couldn't really see the shirt, but it kind of looked like he was wearing a jacket and like sort of a large brimmed hat, not necessarily a cowboy hat or anything, but he was standing there, and just the feeling you got from him, like, just overwhelming, kind of like getting hit with a tidal wave of just absolute, like, dread and terror. And Just, if it's a bad feeling, you're getting hit with it. That dude, like, when she turned and saw him and gasped, she disappeared. I was so terrified that I couldn't move. I just sort of, I don't know, did the best I could, covered my head up with a pillow, like closed my eyes, and eventually nothing happened and I passed out. I mean, it had to have been like 4 something in the morning at that point, I think. But, I wake up and the next morning and my friend Mike isn't in the room, and I'm looking around wondering if I'm nuts or what the hell did I see last night. And I go, downstairs, and my mom and Michael's mom and dad and his sister and him, they're all down there, and all the parents are making breakfast, and we're all sitting down at the table, and everybody's acting totally normal. I was like, do any of you guys, have you ever, been bothered by anything? And they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, do you know your house is haunted? Like, everybody kind of just shut up for a second and looked at me. And then my friend Mike's mom, she's like, oh, hold on a minute. And she walked over to this little bookshelf she had in her kitchen that had, like, cookbooks and whatever on it. And she grabbed this one book and opened it up and set it down right in front of me. She's like, yeah, this place is haunted. In the book is a picture of their house with, like, history of it, and there's a ghost of a little girl and an old man in this house. And it went on to talk about how the little girl wound up dying because she was in her room underneath the bed playing with, like, matches and a candle, and she wound up setting the bedclothes on fire, and she died. She died in a fire in that room that I was sleeping in. And supposedly the old man is her grandfather. And nobody really knows much else about him, but other than he's extraordinarily scary and nobody likes it when he shows up, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But my friend's mom would tell me that they would find little things in the house that they had no idea where they came from, and they were always like little presents, like little old wooden toys, or like I think they found an old dress at one point that was for some reason like packed away in some of her mom's stuff that, they had no idea where this old handmade little girl's dress came from. But all these things would, like, show up. A lot of the toys would show up, like, in proximity to, their daughter. They never really said, like, anything bad happened, but they all at different points had seen the little girl and whatever. That was the beginning of that vacation, and the first time I ever really saw, like, a spirit or ghost or anything like that.
That's not often that the questions are answered, as far as, because the big question would be, well, who are they? Who's the little girl? Who's the man? Well, you found that out. That's pretty remarkable.
I wish I could remember the name of that book, but like, I know it was obviously their house. It kind of blew my mind. Kind of thought it was cool. Then I don't know. Yeah, that was the first. That was the first 2 ghosts I'd ever seen, and I mean, I know in the history of that house they had talked about how it had been like a field hospital for soldiers during the Revolutionary War. It had been like
wow.
a brothel at one point, and like they'd hung people from like the trees out right outside the front of the house, and like all this wild history of a house, that is as old as that one is, and the location where it's at. I mean, it's kind of cool that there's all this information that they had about, the history of that house. But yeah, like I agree with you. It's not often you come across something where you're like, what the hell was that? And then here's everything that you can essentially ask for right there.
Well, I mean, considering the history of the place, I mean, over 300 years now of things like that going down, hangings, what goes on at brothels, that half the time is a lot of violent stuff. I mean, I would hazard to say those are probably not the only two people hanging around. Who knows what's going on at that place? Holy smokes.
They said that they had never had anything really negative happen. Like, I think their mom was the only one besides me who ever, of their family that ever saw the old man. She said, from the best that I can remember, is she kind of out of the corner of her eye saw him walk past her bedroom door one night, and then that was it. But that's enough. Especially if you're, I guess, thinking if you're alone in the house and the next thing you see out of the corner of your eye is a dude walking right by your bedroom door.
Yeah, that would suck. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my Virginia story. But that one was the first time I saw a ghost.
Well, that's quite the interactive ghost. The little girl, she's pulling the covers off and she's finding it funny. And then she turns and she sees the man and she gasps. And I wonder if she's gasping because she's scared of him, because you did say that mostly when he shows up, it's, not a good thing. Or if she's just like, oh, I'm busted, like, oopsie. And then poof, she's gone.
That's kind of what I've wondered that too. And like, why is he upset? Well, can you leave the kid alone? Quit waking him up. But definitely not something that I could forget, even if I wanted to. And that one, I don't mind so much. That one was kind of a neat confirmation, like, wow, this stuff does really exist. It's not, it's not an overactive imagination. It's not a lie. It's not, whatever. It is what you thought it was. Like,
well, how about we discuss the apartment with your ex-girlfriend?
Oh man, yeah. If you want to go in order, there's something that happened within a year or two of the apartment thing happening.
Yeah, go right ahead.
That one was a different girlfriend. This one probably one of the scariest things that I've ever experienced anywhere. Like I'm a big dude. I've been, been in some crazy situations, like big crazy shows, stage dives, whatever. Like that's all good, but this girl brought some stuff with her that it's never left completely. I'd never this. I remember talking to her one night when we weren't even dating yet. We were just hanging out. We found out both of us enjoyed listening to Art Bell when he was still, doing that. And we got to talking about that a little bit. And she's like, I see shadow people like every day. I was like, what are you talking about? Because I at that point, I hadn't really heard anything about them, and let alone like seen one. I don't know. We talked about it. It was a cool conversation, went on about life. There was more important stuff to be thinking about at that moment other than something spooky. We had hung out one night. I've got to kind of, on this one, I kind of have to think and try to not give too much information. It's a weird one. We'd gone out, had a few drinks, hung out with friends, and she came back to my place that night, and things were going great. Then suddenly stuff was very weird and not good. Being on the bed, doing what you do with a significant other. The next thing I know, I'm watching us from the corner of the room. I'm kind of horribly confused as to how am I standing by the lamp in the corner of my room and while simultaneously being on the bed with my girlfriend. That's when I turned, the me that was on the bed turned and looked at the me in the corner and smiled a really sinister looking smile and laughed. And then my face changed and it wasn't me. It started laughing, just kind of like, and it, things kept going, and I'm standing there freaking out, watching this thing that was supposed to be me. Why am I outside of my body? I'd never experienced anything like that before. Thankfully, I haven't since. But I don't know how I managed. It sounds crazy to me to try and describe it to another person. How do you explain, like, for lack of a better way to describe it, like somehow it's like astral projection, but like I'm, in my bedroom and something else is driving the car that is my body.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I got kicked out of my body and was forced to stand there and watch that go down. And then I remember like just I was pissed. I was really pissed off. At that point, the facial features that this thing had were very serpent-like to connect the dots there. I basically I got enraged and just kind of, I guess, I for lack of any better way to describe it, it's like I just dove back into my body with the most determination you could ever muster, thinking like, I'll be damned if you're going to do this to me and her. And since I don't know, I assume it would piss anybody off to, be kicked out of their own body and have something crappy like taking advantage of the whole situation. And I think I was lucky to be able to get back in. But building up to that night, I started seeing shadow people with her. We'd be anywhere, her house, in front of her parents. They would see them too. My roommates would see them. When we would both see them, or when I would see them, or if it was just her there, they would see them with her. It got pretty extreme at a point, kind of all building up to that night. I don't know. Eventually, that relationship disintegrated and we moved on. And thankfully, things kind of, as far as the shadow people appearances, that kind of calmed down a good bit. But I still see them. Certainly not every day. I'd say about once a month at least, I'll see something I would consider a shadow person.
Where are you seeing them?
Oh man. Interestingly, I have not seen any of them in the place that I'm living now. Let me knock on some wood real quick.
Definitely do that.
I mean, I've seen them at friends' houses. I've seen them at work, various places I've worked. Of course, I don't know. That wasn't always the same building. I've done construction on and off for several years now, and some of the places we went up totally wasn't surprised to see stuff. One of them being Brushy Mountain State Prison, but we did some renovations up there, and yeah, that place is wild. But no, man, I've seen them. I've seen them everywhere at this point.
Brien, why do you think this current home has none of that activity? Do you think it has to do with you or the place that you're living?
I think a little bit of both, honestly. As far as like my parents' house, as an example, I think there's lots of reasons why I would see stuff there. All of us, with the exception of possibly my stepdad, have had friends and other family members, and everybody nearly has seen stuff at my mom's place. My mom claims to have seen like this big black smoky looking mass sort of moving around slowly on the ceiling in the living room. It just appeared to her one night. That place definitely has its own weirdness to it. But I think over the years, like I've dealt with these kind of experiences now for like pretty much my whole life. And at a point, I would say, obviously I didn't know what was going on. And over the years, I've done a lot of reading. I've tried different stuff. I got into meditation a whole lot, learned some stuff as far as like, I don't know where you stand on chi energy or anything like that. I learned to work with that to a point. Sorry, not to wander off into a whole bunch of disconnected thoughts or anything, but I think the reason that I haven't been seeing them at my current home is because it's a much more positive place. I've learned to kind of, it sounds silly, appreciate the little things. I will try and proactively find something positive in a negative situation to focus on. I've learned not to necessarily, like, if I think maybe something creepy is going on, I'll deal with it when I think about it, and then I won't dwell on that. I try to refuse to let my fear build up anymore, if that makes any sense. I try not to let any of it get a foothold or have any energy to feed on or anything. I don't know. Over the years, I've learned that I can feel these things when they come around to a point where, if a lot of times, if there is something around, it'll come to me. It's weird, and there for a while, I think it was getting out of hand as far as like, encounters with different things, just because maybe I didn't know how to deal with. Maybe I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe these things knew that I had something where I could feel them, because if there's something in the room, I can tell you exactly in the room where it is. And there's been times where I felt something in the room, and then I'll get hit with times with like a really horrible, like, rotting smell, or the temperature in the room will drop drastically and you're seeing your breath. That's happened to me a few times. But like over the years, I've gotten, I guess, maybe on a level a little bit desensitized by some of it, and I don't know. I've learned how to deal with it a little bit better now, just out of necessity, really.
Well, that's a good thing. At least your home now is much more peaceful. I mean, I wouldn't want to see any of these things that people share in my own home. It's one thing to go to a haunted place and it's cool and scary, and you're trying to figure out piece together history and there's a whole thing, but not in your own house. That's just not cool.
No,
So,
it kind of sucks.
yeah. I've always known that part of things. As much as I want to see a Bigfoot and all this other stuff, I don't want a whole bunch of serpent-like, a Robert changing face thing in my room, or a giggly girl I can see through at the foot of my bed. I really wouldn't want that.
I mean, I don't know, like, you can keep Sasquatch and Dogman. Like, I'm good.
You're all set
like,
on
I
that,
think
huh?
there's the Dogman thing anyway, but like, I didn't like that either. But we'll get to that
well,
one.
we'll save that one. We're gonna save that one. Yeah. Well, did you want to move to the 109-year-old house in Chattanooga?
Oh, that was, well, real quick. The other girlfriend in the apartment, that one, and then we'll talk about the 109-year-old house, and that was actually outside of Chattanooga by about 45 minutes towards Nashville. But yeah, because I think honestly these are connected as well. The other, different girlfriend, like I had said, we had gotten an apartment together, and she had a little girl that lived with us, and at the time, things had been going great. It was weird because where she had lived before we got the place was towards like Knoxville, Tennessee, like 2 hours north of Chattanooga, I guess. We wound up having some issues with stuff up there as far as like things like she had like a wireless baby monitor all the time, at least once a night. We would wind up hearing some of the creepiest stuff I've ever heard come across, like a I don't know, a speaker in my life. Like we had stuff come through that thing that was straight up terrifying. But, you can say a lot of stuff as, oh, that's just interference or static. And then there's that stuff that you're like, nope, that's not what that was at all. And we wound up doing a cleansing on that place. And then shortly thereafter, we were like, you know what, let's just get a place together. So we did. And stuff was good. And one night, she was upstairs taking a bath. And I was, I don't know, doing whatever I was doing downstairs. And was getting ready for bed. Walked up the stairs. And, she had the door open and everything. I just stuck my head in and was like, hey, you need anything? And she looked up at me and, like, screamed. And I'm like, thanks. Sorry if I startled you. What's wrong? And she's like, Brien, you literally already walked past the bathroom and stuck your head in and smiled at me 15 to 30 seconds before you just walked by here and started talking to me now.
Uh-oh, that sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I was like, are you serious? She's like, I'm not kidding. You walked up here, looked in the room, smiled at me, and then walked off into the bedroom and shut the door. Her family has had a past dealing with really insanely scary stuff too. So we kind of knew that about one another. And so when she talked about stuff, I listened, and that kind of went both ways because we knew better than to just think it was a joke. I mean, nothing else really happened that night, but eventually things got pretty bad, and unfortunately, I mean, that relationship wound up ending. We still talk every now and again. We're on good terms now, which I'm thankful for, but both of us kind of have wondered if maybe something didn't have something else to do with it, like.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was loading up all my stuff to move out of there, and it was me and my dog, and I was, you do that last pass through your place to make sure you're not leaving like, your important stuff like credit cards or a birth certificate like lying on the counter for whoever to come by and snag or whatever. I was in the kitchen about to go out the back door, I turned off all the lights as I came down the steps and everything, and I was about to grab my dog, and she started snarling. She's like a black lab mix, pretty decent sized dog. Uh, Never growled at anything ever. She was goofy as hell, but a real sweet dog. But she was growling on a whole different level, like she was about to lose her mind on something. Baring her teeth, all the hair on her back was straight up, her tail was tucked, and she was looking off into the living room and just looked like she was ready to fight. And I was like, "What's going on?" And that's when I started hearing the doors upstairs in the apartment slam, and started hearing stomping. That would just going from room to room and slamming the doors, and it started coming down the steps, and it was so bad that my dog just pissed right where she was standing, and then hid behind me. It like this when I say stomping, like it was loud enough that I don't know, like a Clydesdale was walking down the steps. The sound was loud enough that I wouldn't have been surprised if like the boards were breaking in the steps. Like it was bad enough that I literally picked my dog up and just skipped out the back door and was like, "Nope, done. I'm out of here. Not coming back. Don't care." And that was it. I literally never went back to that place. That was what's wild about that is the apartment. That apartment was on the end of the building. The apartment right next to it that we were connected to, nobody was living in that. So like any noise that I heard, there's no way it was anybody next door because there hadn't been anybody there in like 3 months. That was bad. That's when I really kind of started wondering, like, is something following me, like for real? Because there for a minute, there's the stuff that happened with the girl I dated before, and then something that happened with the next one, and it was like, is this thing, how much influence is this thing having over my life? And then I wound up getting married and to someone else. We wound up moving to that 109-year-old house, outside Chattanooga.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little biography. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. else. They will say, no, we don't believe literally in reincarnation. That after your funeral, you will suddenly become somebody different, living somewhere else. They will say reincarnation means this, that if you sitting here now are really convinced that you're the same person who walked in at the door half an hour ago, you're being reincarnated. If you are liberated, you will understand that you're not. The past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. There is only the present. That's the only real you that there is. The Zen master told everybody in this way. He said, spring does not become the summer. First there is summer, and then there is spring. When you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on, you are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. The master will say to somebody, get up and walk across the room. And he comes back and he says, where are your footprints? They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.